lighting is really one of the tools to tell any story. I do remember shipping a shot of Matrix. Guys, I'm not kidding. It was 56 frames. And I think I final version 87 version for less than 2 seconds. And when it comes to visual effects, the visual effects supervisor is going to say, this is great. This goes to film. It cannot be democratic. This is capitalism.
Today on the pod, we have Alberto Noti. He is an art and lighting director at Raven Software, which is a part of Activision, where he's worked on a variety of games in the Call of Duty space. He's also known for his visual effects work on The Matrix, Spiderman 2, Hancock, I Am Legend, and a variety of other films. As a fan of all those games and films, much like millions around the world, I'm super excited today to dig into the process of lighting and visual effects work with Alberto. Great to have you today. Maybe we can start off by telling us a little bit about how you grew up and what your interests were back when you were a kid.
Of course, thank you. Well, first of all, pleasure is on mine, so thank you for having me, guys, on your podcast. My dad was one of the most well-known illustrators back in Italy. And so I grew up watching him doing graphic design and advertising. Just let me tell you that back in my time, there was no computer graphics school. So I studied for kind of computer engineering. And so the love of computer and graphic design at some point kind of luckily merged with the very first computers back then. And something that you never saw probably, which was Amiga. It was a very, very primordial computer. And so that was my love, to make something that looks real, but is not with a computer.
Wow, that's amazing. What did the industry look like back then? You said your father was in it. What was the kind of work that he was doing?
So, well, he was a graphic designer. So back then, all by hand, right? Back at his time, it was all handmade, right? So then desktop publishing arrived, everything changed. But when I started, I think that when I joined Rim Media Studios in LA, they were still expanding the universe of visual effects and creativity. It was incredibly exciting because I had the honor to work with visionaries, with really incredible people. Back then, we were all trying to invent something, to come up with technology to make movies and images more real.
Alberto, when you first tell a story, it seems like a very smooth trajectory, but I'm sure along the way, it wasn't always clear to you that this is exactly what you'd be doing and you would turn out to be as successful as you are. So could you walk us through maybe some of those key milestones where you felt very challenged or maybe you thought of giving up? Those would be really helpful.
Well, keep in mind, I grew up living back in Italy, back in Milano. Milano is like New York of Italy, and Rome maybe is LA back then in terms of culture and dynamics and energy and especially technology. It's hard to say because I'm always been extremely passionate. And I think that passion is the fuel to push you when things are not going well, right? Passion usually kicks in and say, you know what, I'm going to try again. I'm going to try a different way to get there. For example, I started teaching desktop publishing software classes because there was no computer graphics. There was no CG commercial back then. Pixar was still inside ILM. So we are talking about at the end of the 80s. There was no school, so it was not an option to say, hey, I'm going to apply to the school. I'm going to figure out, whatever it takes. No, there are no schools. I was able to jump through different workstations, to different packages, different software, try different things. Keep in mind, guys, back then, there was maybe, 3 or 4 packages, right? And they were very, very difficult to use. But long story short, I think that when you have so many challenges in front of you, somehow your brain starts to figure out cheats and way to obtain the visual goal without some powerful tools that back then simply they were not invented yet. Guys, the Silicon Graphics was the most famous computer used in the 90s and 2000 to make any movies, to make visual effects in general. And they were the real workstation, dedicated to create and to render CG images, 3D images, right? So they were crazy expensive. Back then you're talking about 100 grand, 200, 300 grand for one machine We are talking this in the early
Wow.
90s, right? So it was
Yeah.
extremely expensive. But finally, we had the power. We had the computing power. We have a software like Softimage. I don't know if you ever heard of it. It's software made in Canada, very powerful 3D tool. I ended up making a small demo, like a short movie, that was picked up by the Berlin Film Festival and by the New York Film Festival. LA studios were able to see my name and see what I was making and give me a phone call if I wanted to join them in LA.
So we jumped through seemingly many years, if not decades. And you mentioned in
Yeah,
the beginning days, you had to do anything you could just to make and create the
yeah.
kind of visual effects that you were imagining in your mind. So what were some of those things that you had to do in the absence of the technology that we have today?
Well, keep in mind that simply we didn't have the power. So I really don't want to go into boring and technical thing, but you start to cheat. You start to make 2D things where you cannot allow 3D object. You start really to put lights only on the things that you know they look good, and the other things that simply was impossible to make. You try to keep them dark, or but that's a lot of things. But keep in mind that also you're talking about 640 by 480 resolution back then, right? It was not 1K, 2K, or 4K like now, right? So it's
Yeah.
like we go back then a lot now. So
Wow.
It sounds like when you started out, you were very much a pioneer in your field. Like the tools don't exist and you just have to make do with what you have. Steve Jobs
correct.
has that quote. It's something along the lines of like, you can only connect the dots looking back. So it's easy for you to say now, like, you had all these rudimentary tools. Did you know at that time that things were like very basic, or did it feel like you were using cutting edge technology?
The guys, it was truly exciting. We CG creatures, we used to meet in Monaco, in Monte Carlo, at the CG festival called Imagina. But all the American colleagues and everybody else on this side of the planet, is, we met at SIGGRAPH. SIGGRAPH, which is still happening these days, was really a chance for all of us to kind of meet and say, hey, what did you figure it out? Did you create a new code, a new piece of software, something that allows us now to have fluid animation? For example, guys, today when you animate the CG characters, there is something inside the CG model called a rig. So where with the arm and legs, practically we build bones, right? It just
Yeah.
within the software, within the software package, you just create a skeleton. Back then, there was no skeleton. There was nothing of that. So it means that when you have to move an arm, you have to move each piece individually to move. Now with a skeleton, you just grab a hand, you move a hand, and automatically the arm follows. Back again, back then we didn't have any of that, right? So, so no, it was exciting. The point is, it doesn't exist, so you better figure out. You better come up with something that looks equally convincing.
Wow. You've created a film or played a part in a film that was noticed by the Berlin and New York film festivals.
Yeah.
What do you think you did unique to those films that got the attention that it did?
Oh, guys, back in the 80s to render 3 minutes of full CG, it was a huge challenge. 3 minutes is like probably make like, I don't know, like 10 hours of CG today in terms of investment and time. It was it was quite difficult. And I think that I was lucky that what I made caught the attention of people that were running big studios in LA because it was about the story. We've been talking about visuals now, we've been talking about technology, but then in the end, if you have a good story, if you're selling a dream, then the visuals, yes, very important, especially in Hollywood, but not as much, right? So
Yeah.
the story was about a small electric fan. This small antique fan is inside the room, and a paper airplane just enters from the window, and the electric fan start to feel like my space has been invaded by another plane. If you think about it, the electric fan, if you flip the blades, then it's gonna pull air instead of push air. And so at that moment, the camera switches, you are the electric fan, and you just fly inside the room like in a dogfight sequence against the paper airplane. Now, I don't want to make it too long again. It was just a dream, right? CG back then was a lot about dreaming. Pixar, with Lotso Jr., or with many other animation, they were trying to sell the idea that toys have the soul, right? Toys are alive. So
Yeah, I've read some of these origin stories behind certain great hits from Pixar and other studios. And I'm curious, where do you go for your creative inspiration?
I tend to get bored very easily. I'm not old, but I'm vintage, guys. Right? I'm not constantly on Instagram, or I'm not available, but I'm hungry every day. Even when I drive around, I pay attention to how the shadows are following the shape of the building. Architecture. I try to travel as much as I can. I love to go to see new places, and I don't know, guys. I think it's colors. I look at the sky very often. I just love to see how colors are mixing, not necessarily just individual color. Oh, this is a nice color. No, I like to see how colors mix with other colors, and how sometimes you get shadow of an interesting color which I would never make. So I try to observe reality and try to dissect it. This is probably the habit that I had to come up with when I was younger. We didn't have a technology, and you need to recreate reality.
It's awesome. You've mentioned a bit how lighting gives mood and passion to an image, and that lighting is a really big deal to you. Tell us in your words how lighting contributes to a film and brings life to it and brings mood to it.
I think that lighting is like the soul of the image, if you will. I think that also music has a big part, also sound has a big part. But let's say you have an actor which maybe is not giving a great performance, but if the actor is rim lit, and there is a certain color temperature in the room, so the light is not just neutral, is a specific, so automatically you as a viewer, you start to attach all those colors, all those meaning to the actor, to the person that is performing a scene. And suddenly it is way more interesting than just this guy telling a line, right? Lighting can guide, especially in video games. Lighting is one of the main factors to drive you to a certain objective, or, to find and search for certain things. So lighting always tends to give you a clue to help you on that. But most of the time is really to set the mood, right? If it's a nighttime, you don't go blue, but you start to introduce some of the green, then suddenly it's creepy. Suddenly it doesn't feel right, because we all have an idea of nighttime as a more calming blue. But if it's teal, then it becomes a little stormy, right? So lighting is really one of the tools to tell any story.
As a consumer of movies and a player of video games, whenever I'm recommending a movie or film to a friend, I usually give a very holistic rating. Like I'll say, Abe, I just watched this film. It was really good. And of course, the lighting, music, the acting, the storyboarding, it all comes together as one cohesive piece. So I'm curious, what are some examples of work where you feel like the most proud of your contributions to it?
It's very easy to let your ego to kind of condition the answer, right? Because Spider-Man 2 was the only Spider-Man live action that got an Academy Award for Best Visual Effects. So, naturally say, well, that was an acclaimed and obviously rewarded movie. I think for me, guys, is about the experience I'm having with a team, right? So very often when I had the chance to choose on which movie to work on, after a while, okay, I was The Matrix, The Men in Black, a great movie, and don't get me wrong, I'm very grateful I had the chance to work on those. But after you do some of them, for me is I would ask who's working on that team. For me, it was about working with a certain group of people that I felt they were really inspiring and very pleasant to work with. So of all the movies, I think probably the one I enjoyed to work the most was I Am Legend. And just because we were trying to figure out how to create this emocyte, this zombie, this creature. And we had a lot of technical challenges because we want to have two layers of skin, one on top of each other. I'm talking about CG skin. When you have maybe few millimeters from the two different type of body to again CG body, when you animate the creature, you had intersecting polygons. It becomes really tricky. So technically, we had big challenges, but the people that was on my team working with me, they were absolutely brilliant and fun to work with. So it's not about box office in the end for me. It's more about, if I could work again with these people, I would do it.
I'd love to take a little bit of a detour. It's not every day that I get someone with such a wide range of film and video game experience. I was wondering if you could pull up a clip from either a film or a game that you put together and just sort of walk us through the way you break it down, like, oh, this lighting decision, how that creates the mood, something from like a more from the creator's eye versus the consumer. We just see it as the end product.
Well,
okay, I'm gonna play through, and you tell me when to pause, and then we'll listen to your breakdown for that.
You can go until the dogs come out. So the hemocyte guys, these are zombies, right? If they are exposed to the sun, they're gonna burn, they're gonna die, right? So the challenge here, guys, is to make the creature, the zombie, the dude itself, to make it feel as human and as like this guy, right? I spent months working on the skin and the eyes of this creature, right? So, and then keep in mind, guys, this is old too. You're talking about something which is already 20 years old. So
2007, yeah.
See, so it's like, my God, it's like, I mean, it feels like 30 years old. I mean, but anyway. And so the challenge is how much you're gonna let the viewer see. If you see him too much, that is not gonna hold on very well. You know, it feels obviously too much fake. And if you don't show him enough, then you cannot see all the nuances of a person of a facial expression, which was, trust me, it was tweaked and tweaked and tweaked for months, right? So the dog itself, it's a zombie dog. We as human, obviously, we relate to pets with affection, but when you see human, you start immediately to look for some kind of connection.
Are you aiming for something that's like a bit undercorrected or overcorrected if it's framed compared to reality?
For me, the goal is to make it look as real as possible. I would do anything to make something that looks more real. Talking to the lighting artist, we would spend probably weeks just dialing the softness of the shadows, right? Because keep in mind, you need to comp the shadows too.
Very cool. Let me play a few more seconds of this clip here, just so we can see a bit more of the work you've done.
Alberto, I'm curious, as Abe is looking for this other clip.
Yeah.
Do you always watch the final result when it like comes out in the movies, or do you always play the games that you work on, or is it kind of like you worked on it, you want to move on to the next project?
Once it's done, I want to bury the thing as fast as I can. You spend so many months, sometimes years with it, that you just want to move to something different. Sometimes we are invited to the movie premiere with the cast, with the actors and everyone. In that case, I'm happy to go and watch it again because I'm going to watch it with the colleagues, with the actors, with the movie directors. So that is more a communal experience, going back to what you said before.
This is a bit of a detour. I'm wondering, what makes a good movie good and what makes a good video game good? And are they the exact same things, or are you going to assess them differently?
Is very subjective. I think we all have a pretty good idea about what makes a movie, and for me, it's about what is going to connect, what is going to click your brain, right? Do you need to unplug from the stress or whatever, right, in your life, or you need something to actually engage your brain in a different way? Because then you have a Transformers, you have Marvel, you have that kind of blew me away with incredible imagery, or you have something completely different, which is going to make you think. It's going to make you feel more here versus here, right? I don't think it's possible to have an absolute answer to this. I think that the movies and games, guys, they're both entertainment products, right? In the end, you are allowing people to just escape, right? And hey, people choose other forms of escapes, right? Alcohol, drugs, booze, whatever you want, whatever is good for you to unplug and try to kind of feel better about yourself or about your life. I think movies and games are maybe one of the healthiest in that sense, right? We've been talking for quite some time about imagery, but words are as powerful as pictures, right? So, and that's why going back to The Last of Us, some of the dialogue is extremely powerful. And so the words are more powerful than the picture you're watching.
I might take a little bit of a pivot here, but I think something interesting I've been waiting to ask you is, are you an artist or an artisan?
I was going to ask the same question.
This is something that I start to define when I was used to interview new artists, because I like to think that even if, again, I'm very happy I have a chance to talk with you guys about the things I had the chance to work on. Reality, I was just a small gear. I was just a small part of a huge team, right? And why am I saying that? I'm saying this because you cannot be truly an artist unless you sign the canvas. This is a very naive point of view, but what I'm trying to say is that we do art, we do real art as artisan. So we are building somebody else's vision. So, for example, Van Gogh, Picasso, I wake up in the morning and I have this picture in my brain. I'm gonna make it, I'm gonna sign it, right? I think that for me, the idea of artist in that sense cannot always be applied to what we do in games or in movies, because we already have an image where somebody else already thought, and our job is to make it with craftsmanship, with artistry, and with a lot of skills. Does this make me an artist? I'm not always sure about it.
So then, if you are a self-described artisan, how do you have a part of you that wants to scratch the artist itch, and how do you do it if it exists? Do you have side projects or other outlets to feel like?
Yeah, I used to draw my own things. I like to fix my motorcycle on my own. I like to use my hands. Going back to being an artist, I like to use my hands to do things or to build furniture. But going back to being an artist versus an artisan, I think that one of the challenge, if you truly believe to be an artisan, you're gonna suffer a lot, because art is also about pain, guys. When you have it's like when you have to write something and you have a blank piece of paper, a blank Word document. To get the momentum going sometimes is painful. You need to assemble your thoughts. You start, it doesn't work, and you start again. When you start to draw or to create images, it's not always it. So when I should say the best thing, it doesn't come out easily or at once or at the first try. So as an artist, and also when you create something, then you start to get attached to it. You start to love it. But wait a second, this is not yours. This was made by a team, by somebody else told you to do it. Even if you did a good job, still is not your idea, your concept. We change things over and over and over and over until creative director, the client, whoever says, okay, this looks right now. I do remember shipping a shot of Matrix. Guys, I'm not kidding. It was 56 frames. And I think I final version 87. 87 version for less than 2 seconds.
Can
So
you describe to us what went into some of those versions? Like, what were the comments and adjustments you made in those 2 seconds of the Matrix?
yeah, there is a technical term, but you're gonna blip it. so I cannot use it. But there is a Hollywood technical term, which is pixel F-ing. Practically, because especially Hollywood, you want to have the best image, the best quality you can. Hollywood, if you don't do it at Hollywood, where are you going to do it? And so every small nuances, every pixel artifacts, or simply the image is too bright, too dark, too red, too blue, the composition. There are so many aspects that goes into making an image, which even on just less than 2 seconds shot, which is 2 seconds, 1001, 1002, it's gone. Still, you can pick up defects or small issues. So there are so many things that can be changed. Or simply, director doesn't like it. And then you say, you know what, let's try this way. Let's change a camera here, or let's just change animation. And so now for more complex shot, guys, for more money shots where you have maybe the big Spiderman in frame, I've seen version 300 easily going to final. Easily. Because, that is a money shot. That has to be perfect, has to look amazing, right? So
who makes that call? How do you know you're there?
well, okay. When it comes to special effect, to visual effects, the visual effects supervisor, which is the creative director, like in the movie industry, in Hollywood, you have a visual effects supervisor, is going to say, this is great. This goes to film. This is done. But the client or the executive producer of the movie, who knows? Whoever is above, the visual effects team is going to say, guys, no, to me it doesn't look like. Or simply the movie director say, I'm sorry, it doesn't look good.
So
And
it's
then
not democratic. It kind of goes up in layers in this process.
It's never this is capitalism. Hey, and honestly, it cannot be democratic, because you can imagine it's gonna take forever to somebody has to make the call. Somebody has to say yes or no. It cannot be democratic, unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know.
It's awesome.
Alberto, to inspire and to be inspired. What does that mean to you?
Yes. When I was younger, guys, I couldn't understand. I could not understand how people around you, like other artists, other art directors, other people around you can really change, can almost rewire your brain in the way you see art or you see life. And interesting enough, most of the time, the people that inspire me, they did it involuntarily. When you are inspired, sometimes it's not necessarily because somebody is trying to inspire you. People say something and somehow it gets stuck. It's like a seed and it doesn't go away. Sometimes it blooms. If you're lucky, it blooms and it creates new thought and it opens up few doors in the way you see your work or your life or the people that you care, right? So I think that one of the challenges doing something which is very artistic, like making movies or making games, is also the opportunity for me to inspire other people. It doesn't mean young or old, it's just the people I work with have a chance to kind of share, my dream or my vision, but also at the same time to be able to be inspired at the same time. So
yeah, I've got one last question from my side. Actually goes back to The Last of Us. I didn't play the video game, but I saw the TV show, and I think it's because it's refreshing. I don't want to give too many spoilers, but it's just very different than a thriller zombie type. I'm curious, what kind of stories do you think need to be told more in either in video games or movies?
I think the story that we all want to hear are not the old. How can I say? I want to tell stories which are not mainstream, are not the usual. I want to hear new stories, stories of minorities, stories of people different than me, different but this face or different age. I just want to hear different story. I want to have a different. I want to know how it feels to live from your point of view, not necessarily from a guy that looks like me and probably had the same experience, right? So It comes down to the writing, it comes down to the storytelling, it comes down to character. The Last of Us was about the dialogue, the relationship between the girl and the guy, right? And his protector or it doesn't capture. It was ambiguous, right? So, and how this affection grows, right, through pain, right? So, I don't know, guys. I think that if everything was easy, we as a human, we would not grow. I think I really don't want to sound pessimistic, but some pain, to a certain degree, pain sometimes is a good, how can I say, growth catalyst.
Awesome. I have one last question to wrap
Sure.
it up here, Alberto. It's been a pleasure. You're someone who's been in this industry of lighting, art, video games, movies, film for a long time. You started back before Matt and I were both born, experimenting and creating and charting a new path. And now the movie industry is mature. The video game industry is also maturing. What is some advice you would give to a newly budding or aspiring artist or artisan looking to move in similar spaces that you have? How would you advise them to get their first steps and first reps in?
If you develop some skills, just lean onto the skills. Just try to grow and to build some kind of portfolio, a demo reel, a website, whatever you think it will advertise what you do in the best way possible. And as a young artist, now you have amazing tools. And we didn't even touch AI, which, we just start to use it. Don't be afraid of the tools. Use them to your advantage to create something different, right? I wish I could born again and start with the tools that we have now, because instead of wasting time just with math to figure out basic stuff, we didn't have the wheels when we started our car, and we didn't have the engine. We had to make everything. Now you have these beautiful, sleek, fast, and safe, and amazing, powerful cars. Now you can really release your brain. So this is really exciting time. Even if there are thousands of artists, there are millions of artists on this planet, right? There is still space. It's still possible. You can still make it.
If you enjoyed that episode, please like and subscribe. We're just getting started to tell the stories of these amazing creators, athletes, and entrepreneurs. Drop a comment below on what was your favorite part of this episode, and stay tuned because we're going to be releasing new episodes every 2 weeks for On the Rise. See you next time.